We have a blessed coincidence or convergence of dates when this reading from the Book of Proverbs comes around in the cycle of readings for the end of the year, the liturgical year, because this praise of this worthy holy woman from Proverbs 31 and various verses between verse 10 and verse 31, praising this worthy wife and all that she does, particularly where it says she reaches out her hands to the poor and extends her arms to the needy and identifies her as a woman who fears the Lord. It's a blessed coincidence or circumstance that this will always come around near the time of the feast day of our patron, Saint Elizabeth of Hungary. Her feast day is November 17, and she definitely fulfilled this image from Proverbs. She was born in Hungary, a princess. She was the daughter of the king of Hungary, born just around 1200. And then she was married as a young girl, married off to a nobleman in a region at the time called Thuringia. So this guy, Louis, he's got a great title, Louis the Landgrave of Thuringia. Okay? So I don't know how young Elizabeth was, but it's typical for royal marriages back then, I guess. So she moved to Thuringia. So she was from Hungary, but she moved to Thuringia. Now, one nice thing about her feast day being on the 17th is that the day before, it's a double feast day for two other very holy women. One is Saint Gertrude, who was a virgin, remained unmarried, devoted her life to God with prayer and contemplation. She was born in Thuringia. Just almost 50 years after Elizabeth was born, Gertrude was born. And I presume by that time, Elizabeth probably was already being the Landgravess of Thuringia. And because of the way the calendar works, where sometimes you get more than one saint on a day, also on November 16th was the feast day of Margaret of Scotland. And even though she's called that, she was born in Hungary. So she was born in Hungary, and she was then married to the King of Scotland. And this was in the 1000s. So we have these three holy women coming up in our calendar at about the same time as this reading from the Book of Proverbs, extolling this image of the worthy wife beyond pearls. I would suggest that certainly Elizabeth and Margaret could see themselves in this reading because they were wives and they were mothers. But even Gertrude and all of us, no matter our gender, no matter our state in life, no matter what is the case about us, we might all be able to identify with this image of the worthy wife, in a sense collaborating with her husband and certainly fearing the Lord because of the imagery of the church as the spouse and the bride of Christ. So whether a woman is single and has made, in particular, a commitment to celibacy, or whether it's a man of any state in life, or a widow, or a widower, no matter what, because we are all caught up in that image of the church as the bride of Christ, the spouse of Christ, I invite us all to identify in some way or another with this image of a woman who fears the Lord, which is to say has reverence for the Lord, dedication to the Lord, you might say in a very healthy way, is afraid to do anything that would disappoint the Lord or dishonor God or would be contrary to God's will. That's a very healthy way to look at what fear of the Lord is, as well as being aware of how powerful God is. that we can all step into that role. We're invited, particularly by Jesus' parable from Matthew chapter 25, to take all that we have, our skills, our temperament, our competencies, yes, our talents, our disposition, all that we are and all that we have, to offer it over to the Lord and to see ourselves as collaborating with God, just as two of the three servants collaborated with the landowner and used what he invested in them in a way that was pleasing to him. So I invite us all each to pray, talk to God, ask God's Holy Spirit in particular. Ask the Holy Spirit to help you see how you might fulfill this image of collaborating with him in all that you have and all that you are. St. Elizabeth did that in her own way. Long before I had the blessing of being assigned here to this parish, I had taken up a connection with Elizabeth of Hungary, because in the collection of prayers and psalms and readings and lives of the saints that's called the Liturgy of the Hours, one of the hours throughout the day, when there is a saint, they have some kind of writing related to the saint. And so I forget how long ago, Elizabeth of Hungary's little biography in the Liturgy of the Hours gave me what still remains, I think, my favorite line in the entire Liturgy of the Hours. Keep in mind, right, she was the daughter of the king of Hungary, and she got married off to the Landgrave of Thuringia, so presumably also royalty, and the nobleman. But she was devoted to prayer and meditation. She lived her faith well. And as it turns out, Louis, the Landgrave's family, weren't too crazy about that. Probably they thought she was a little bit too pious and a little bit too, caring about the poor. It's like, ooh, noble people aren't supposed to touch the poor and care for them. What's wrong with you? You're bringing, a bad reputation to our family. Probably say to Louis, you married down, dude, when you married her. So she was in trouble with her in-laws. Imagine that. Because they didn't like the way she lived out her faith, that's what I gathered. Her husband, according to one version, supported her faith and was happy to have such a noble wife who was also devout and committed to living out the gospel in her way. And this is the line. This was written by her spiritual director. She was two sentences. She was a lifelong friend of the poor and gave herself entirely to relieving the hungry. And this is it. She ordered that one of her castles should be converted into a hospital in which she gathered many of the weak and feeble. First time I read that, I thought, one of her castles? It's like, excuse me, it's like. And so I'm thinking, I cannot relate to somebody who could take one of her castles and make it to a hospital. But the Lord said, no, wait. You can identify with her because she was taking her circumstances. She was taking what she had, the kind of life she led as a noble woman, a royal woman, and she was giving it all over to me in care for others. So all of us can do that no matter what our income, no matter what our state in life, no matter what our socioeconomic status. We can collaborate with God with what we have and who we are. And I invite us all to do that. And also to see and ask God for the grace of experiencing Him collaborating. Collaboration is a two-way street, right? So if we're going to say we collaborate with Jesus and with God the Father through the Holy Spirit, you can ask God to help you see God at work. For example, Elizabeth experienced, according to tradition. She experienced God collaborating with her, so to speak, in that because her in-laws, the husband's side of the family, didn't like what she was doing and caring for the poor, apparently they suspected her of stealing stuff from their riches and either giving them away to the poor or selling them in order to support the poor. Something were in there, they were suspicious of her taking stuff from the castle. What she did take was food. This much I know, and particularly bread to feed the poor. So one time, according to tradition, she was smuggling some bread out of the castle to take to the peasants and the sick people. Family saw her, including her husband. He trusted her and wanted to show the family that she was not stealing, like the gold or the plate, whatever, the stuff of their riches. I don't know if he knew she had bread under her cloak or not. But he, confident that God was with her, stopped her and said, "Open your cloak to show what you've got." And so she had bread under there, which probably also would have gotten her in trouble with that side of the family, because he'd been taking food from the castle, She opens her cloak, and voila, there were roses. God had intervened in a miraculous way and changed the bread to roses to protect her from the wrath of her in-laws. May God help us see ourselves as collaborating with him, caught up in the collective imagery of the church as the bride of Christ, that he might see us as a worthy wife, and that we might be involved in the labor of collaborating with Christ in his mission within the church and the church in the world.